It was a day filled with promise and love, a day meticulously planned to perfection. Friends and family gathered, voices blending with laughter, hands raised in joyful toasts. The bride looked radiant in her gown, and the groom, brimming with pride, was surrounded by the people who'd known him his entire life. The town had turned out in full force to celebrate two people who seemed destined to be together, united in front of family, friends, and someone far closer than anyone realized. As the evening wore on, and the last songs faded into a peaceful night, the newlyweds finally found themselves alone. It was supposed to be a private, intimate moment, the beginning of a lifetime. But what happened behind those closed doors would never allow for such peace. What should have been their happiest moment together quickly turned into a horrifying revelation that would stain that night forever. It began with one question, a small question, or maybe a hesitation in her voice, a look she couldn't quite hide. The groom's happiness faltered, replaced by something darker, an unsettling suspicion. And then the truth came crashing down, as if the floor had been pulled from beneath his feet. She was pregnant, not with his child, but with the child of his best friend, a man he'd trusted with everything. Can you imagine the shock? The rage that must have flooded through him in that instant? This wasn't just any betrayal, it was a dagger from someone who'd stood by his side for years, through childhood, through loss, through all of life's changes. How long had they hidden this? How many lies had been told to cover this secret? The man he'd considered a brother had been holding a truth so dark that it threatened to tear apart every bond of trust and loyalty they'd ever shared. What followed was a moment of silence, a cold pause where no words could fill the space between them. But that silence quickly turned into something far worse. Neighbors later said they heard raised voices, something breaking, and then, finally, an eerie quiet that stretched on until morning. When the police arrived, they found the aftermath of a nightmare, a night that had started with a promise of forever, now stained with blood and broken vows. How could a love story turn so deadly so quickly? What drove this man, moments before committed to a lifetime with the woman he loved, to take her life? What truth, buried and hidden for so long, had the power to unleash such devastation? And what about his best friend, the man at the heart of this betrayal? What role did he play, and could this tragedy have been prevented? This is the story of love, betrayal, and loss that left a quiet town in shock. A story that makes us ask how much we can truly trust those closest to us, and what darkness might be hidden beneath even the strongest friendships. In one night, this town's peace was shattered, leaving a legacy of questions and regrets that would haunt them forever. Our story takes us back to a small, picturesque town, the kind where every face is familiar and every life seems intertwined with the next. It was a place where doors were seldom locked, where neighbors gathered on weekends to share meals and memories, where trust bound the community together in a way that only small towns can understand. It was a place that had seen its share of happy weddings and new beginnings, but in this case, one wedding would bring devastation no one could have anticipated. At the center of this story is Michael, the groom. He wasn't a man of wealth or influence, but he was respected, a hard worker known for his loyalty to friends and family alike. Growing up in this close-knit town, he'd always been the one to lend a helping hand or a kind word. People say that he wore his heart on his sleeve, a man with a quiet confidence, deeply committed to those he loved. Friends would later describe him as reliable, trustworthy, a man of his word. And it was this very loyalty that would eventually lead him down a path he could never have imagined. Then there was Sarah, the bride. She was the kind of woman who seemed born for the spotlight of a wedding day. Friends described her as radiant, a beauty who could light up a room with just a smile. She had charm, an effortless grace, and a way of drawing people in. But there was more to Sarah than met the eye. Behind that charm lay hints of mystery, secrets no one knew, perhaps secrets she hadn't even fully acknowledged herself. She seemed to know just what to say and do to keep people's admiration, but only a few understood the complexities that lay beneath her polished surface. And then there was David, the best friend. He and Michael had been inseparable since childhood. Theirs was the kind of friendship that survived distance, misunderstandings, even time. To everyone else, David was as close to Michael as a brother. He was a charismatic figure, someone who always knew how to bring a smile or lighten a tense moment. People in the town trusted him, saw him as an extension of Michael. If you trusted one, you trusted the other. But David held secrets that would change everything. A hidden life that, if known, might have brought questions and suspicion well before this tragic night. It was a day like any other in the late 1990s, a time when technology had started to change the world, yet life in this town still felt untouched by the rush of modernity. Life here was simple, peaceful. Streets lined with small shops, houses set back with carefully tended gardens, the sounds of laughter from children playing. It was an era that felt safe, dependable, much like the people themselves. In a town like this, everyone knew each other's names, their habits, their routines. It was a place that valued tradition, where things didn't change quickly. The wedding day itself was picture-perfect, with a warm breeze and blue skies. The church was decorated with flowers, the benches lined with family and friends. As the ceremony began, there was a quiet joy in the air, a sense that this was the beginning of something beautiful. Guests talked in hushed tones, exchanging stories and fond memories of the couple, unaware of the dark secrets hidden within their midst. As the vows were spoken, few could have predicted the storm that was brewing just out of sight. Michael's face was lit with a look of pure love, a devotion that everyone could see. Sarah, poised and radiant, smiled back. And David, the best man, watched with a reserved but genuine happiness for his two friends. It's often said that in a small town, secrets don't stay buried for long, but this time the truth was hidden so well, no one suspected what was coming. As guests celebrated, their glasses raised high, laughter ringing out, not one person sensed the growing tension lurking beneath the surface. Not one guest saw the crack that was about to split open beneath the very foundation of this love story. And by nightfall, that same church would become a gathering place not for joy, but for a town caught in shock and grief. As the newlyweds left the celebration to begin their lives together, an ominous quiet settled over the town. For most, it was a night like any other, a time to sleep, to rest after a long day of celebration. But in that quiet, something was changing, something irreversible. As with many weddings in small towns, this one was the event of the season. Families who'd known each other for generations gathered to witness what was meant to be the union of two souls. The days leading up to the wedding had been filled with laughter, heartfelt toasts, and celebrations that spilled into the streets. Friends from childhood, neighbors, cousins, distant relatives, all had come to share in the joy. In every photograph, every memory from those days, Michael and Sarah appeared deeply in love, ready to step into their future together. But as the guests waved the newlyweds off, no one imagined the storm brewing beneath Michael's joyful expression. Friends noticed he'd been a bit quieter that evening, perhaps preoccupied, maybe just feeling the weight of commitment. He'd brushed off the questions with a laugh. But later, as the night deepened and he and Sarah retired to their room, the first signs of trouble appeared. The celebration had ended and the two were finally alone, ready to begin their life together. But for Michael, something wasn't right. He couldn't shake a feeling, an odd sense of unease that gnawed at him as he looked at Sarah, as if he were seeing a part of her he'd missed. It wasn't a single gesture or word, but rather a nagging doubt that seemed to grow by the minute. And then he asked her a question. It might have been innocuous at first, maybe something small, a half-joke about her radiant glow or the way she'd carried herself that night. But her response, or perhaps the way she hesitated before responding, stoked that doubt into something darker. As they sat there in their wedding clothes, the small smile on his face slowly faded. The words she'd said next would forever change him. As Michael pressed her for answers, the truth began to unravel, and when it did, it came with such clarity, such devastating finality, that he felt as though he'd been hit with a physical blow. Sarah was pregnant, but the child she was carrying wasn't his. The words cut through him like a knife, one report would later note. In the quiet of that room, the weight of betrayal settled heavily over them both. Michael's thoughts raced, his mind piecing together the timeline, the small hints he'd missed, the moments of hesitation in her voice. How long had she kept this from him? How many times had she stood by his side, holding this secret close to her heart, while he made plans for their future together? In that moment, Michael's entire world shattered. The woman he loved, the one he'd vowed to cherish and protect, had been hiding the truth, and the father of her unborn child wasn't just anyone. It was his best friend, someone he'd trusted with everything. As he tried to process the betrayal, anger began to build, and before he could stop himself, his voice rose, filling the room with accusations and disbelief. Sarah, caught off guard, tried to calm him down, maybe even offered an apology, but nothing she could say would quell the storm building within him. He demanded answers. Why hadn't she told him? How could she let him stand at the altar, knowing what he didn't know? The betrayal twisted and deepened with every question, every moment of silence that hung between them. The argument escalated as the words flew, each one stoking the fire within him, pushing him further from the man he'd been only moments before. For years, he'd been the quiet, reliable one, the loyal friend, the devoted partner. But in this moment, that devotion turned to something far more dangerous, a fury that had no outlet and no escape. As the shouts grew louder, neighbors heard muffled cries, a hint of the chaos unfolding behind the walls. It's often said that a single moment can change everything, and here, in this small room on the night of their wedding, that moment had come. Michael and Sarah's love had been tested, and in that instant it shattered beyond repair. But as the argument reached its boiling point, there was one final, irrevocable step to come, one that no one could ever take back. By dawn, everything would have changed, and the question that would haunt everyone who knew them was whether anything could have stopped it, whether there had been a single moment where this tragedy could have been averted. Because by morning the town's peace would be broken, and the lives of 3 people, and everyone who'd ever loved them, would be irrevocably changed. Just as the truth about Sarah's affair began to surface, another shocking revelation threatened to turn everything on its head. Michael's discovery on their wedding night had been brutal enough, but as the investigation continued, the authorities began to unravel new layers of deceit that suggested the nightmare wasn't over. In the days that followed the confrontation, the investigation began to piece together the puzzle, but it didn't take long for new details to surface. What the authorities soon uncovered suggested that Michael's lifelong best friend, David, might have known about Sarah's pregnancy all along. At first, David was just another sympathetic figure, a friend caught between 2 worlds. But as the police dug deeper, they started to question just how much David knew. Interviews with those close to him revealed unsettling accounts of David's behavior leading up to the wedding. He had been unusually protective of Sarah, almost possessive at times, and one witness even described a conversation in which David seemed to hint at a complicated situation involving Sarah and Michael. Could it be that David was involved in the affair from the beginning? Did he play a part in covering it up? And most chilling of all, did he know what was about to unfold that night? As detectives reviewed the timeline of events leading to the wedding night, a chilling new theory began to form. Michael's anger, his betrayal, it seemed almost too sudden, too overwhelming. Could it have been brewing for longer than anyone realized? Was it possible that Michael had suspected the affair before his wedding day, that the signs had been there all along? Further investigation revealed that Michael had been acting strangely in the weeks before the wedding, showing signs of what some described as paranoia. He'd become distant, withdrawn, and even started questioning Sarah's behavior. Some family members recalled him asking pointed questions about the timing of Sarah's pregnancy, but no one had taken him seriously. At the time, no one suspected he was already onto the secret that would change everything. As the authorities dug deeper into Michael's state of mind, things began to shift. The groom, once viewed as a victim of betrayal, now became a suspect. His sudden outburst of rage, his confrontation with Sarah, was it simply a man devastated by the truth, or was it the act of someone who had long been planning his revenge? New evidence pointed to the possibility that Michael may have known about the affair well before the wedding night. Friends of David recalled conversations where Michael was oddly calm, almost as if he'd already accepted what he was about to discover. Some speculated that Michael might have been waiting for Sarah to confess, or worse, that he had already known the affair's true nature. Could he have staged the confrontation to set the stage for something far more sinister? In the cold light of the investigation, the question became, was Michael the devastated groom seeking answers, or the calculating man who'd been driven to murder long before the wedding night? But the twists don't end there. As investigators continued to probe the relationship between Michael, Sarah, and David, they uncovered even darker details, ones that would turn everything they thought they knew upside down. The chilling question now became, was this a crime of passion, or a premeditated act fueled by deeper, darker motivations? As the investigation unfolded, more questions emerged than answers. The tragic events of that night left more than one life destroyed, and the ripple effects continued to haunt everyone involved. Michael, the heartbroken groom who had discovered his wife's betrayal, now found himself at the center of a chilling mystery. Was his rage in the moment of confrontation the result of a man completely blindsided by the truth, or had it been planned all along? Could Michael have known about the affair before his wedding day? Was he already prepared for the revelation, anticipating the moment he would finally confront Sarah with the truth? Was the confrontation on their wedding night nothing more than a carefully calculated move, a deliberate act to provoke a reaction, to trigger something darker inside him? And what about David, the best friend who seemed to be caught in the crossfire of this twisted love triangle? Could he truly have been innocent in this tragic chain of events, or was he somehow complicit? Could he have known about Sarah's pregnancy and yet chose to remain silent, hiding his role in the affair? Or was he too a pawn in a much larger, far more dangerous game? What do you think happened during that confrontation? Was Michael's anger the explosion of a man whose heart had been shattered, or the result of a long-brewing scheme methodically orchestrated for revenge? Could David's involvement in this tragedy be more than just a bystander's role? Was he the true catalyst, or did his silence allow the events to unfold as they did? Could this all have been avoided? What might have happened if someone had spoken up earlier, if Michael had uncovered the truth before the wedding? Or was the ultimate tragedy inevitable, written in the stars for all involved? As we explore the twists and turns of this case, I want to hear your theories. What do you think really happened on that fateful night? Could the truth be darker than we imagine? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive into the mystery together. Do you believe justice was truly served, or was this a case where something far deeper lurked beneath the surface? The night that should have marked the beginning of a lifelong journey together instead became the tragic end of Sarah, Michael, and David's shared history. After the confrontation, it didn't take long for the town to learn of the shocking events that transpired. Michael, overwhelmed by betrayal and driven by rage, made a decision that would change everything. What followed was nothing short of catastrophic. In the moments after the argument, police arrived to find Sarah unresponsive. Michael had done the unthinkable. In the heat of the confrontation, his fury erupted beyond control, ending Sarah's life in a brutal and irreversible act. But what followed next left everyone stunned. The authorities quickly arrested Michael, and the case, already tainted with scandal, became one of the most publicized trials the town had ever witnessed. The courtroom was filled with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and sorrow as the trial unfolded. Michael's defense attorneys argued that he had acted out of extreme emotional distress, devastated by the betrayal of his wife and best friend. They painted him as a victim, blinded by love and the pain of discovering a life-shattering secret on the night that should have been one of the happiest of his life. However, the prosecution painted a darker picture. They suggested that Michael's actions weren't a moment of impulsive rage, but rather a calculated act of revenge. Could the groom's discovery that night have been the catalyst for a premeditated plan? Had he known about Sarah's affair long before and waited for the right moment to strike? David, who had once been the loyal best friend, was called to testify, and his role in the affair became a focal point of the case. While there was no definitive evidence linking him directly to the murder, his connection to Sarah and his odd behavior before and after the wedding raised suspicions. The jury wrestled with whether David had played an active part in covering up the affair or if he had merely been complicit in allowing the tragedy to unfold. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for hours. The verdict, when it came, shocked everyone. Michael was convicted of second-degree murder. The judge ruled that Michael's actions, though provoked by betrayal, were not entirely without premeditation. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, leaving the town to grapple with the aftermath of the horrific events. David, for his part, was never charged with any crime. However, the town's judgment was far harsher. His reputation, once built on years of friendship with Michael, was now tainted. He became an outcast in a town where secrets had a way of finding their way to the surface. But even though David's actions were never deemed criminal, many couldn't help but feel that he, too, had played a part in the tragic outcome. As the dust settled and the town tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, one question lingered in the air, haunting everyone involved. Was justice truly served in this case? Michael's sentence was a clear consequence of his actions, but did it really answer the questions that had haunted the community? Could he have truly been a victim of betrayal, or was he, in his rage, just as guilty of betraying the love he once shared with Sarah? And what about David? Was he simply a casualty of the affair? Or did his silence and complicity leave him guilty in his own right? In the end, the tragedy of that night will never be fully understood. Love, revenge, and betrayal collided in a way that left no one unscathed. And as we reflect on the choices made by Michael, Sarah, and David, one thing remains clear. The line between guilt and innocence is far from as simple as it seems. This tragic story serves as a chilling reminder of the dark consequences that can arise from betrayal, love, and revenge. The lives of Michael, Sarah, and David are forever altered, and the truth behind that fateful night continues to haunt the town to this day. If you found this story gripping and full of unexpected twists, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with those who might also be intrigued by real-life mysteries. By subscribing, you'll be the first to hear about our latest true crime documentaries, each filled with shocking revelations and heartbreaking truths. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.